Jen, thanks so much for the chance to be together today in your backyard here in Bath. Could you begin by introducing yourself?
Be more than happy to. I'm just delighted to be sitting here in my garden with you, Jim. I'm Jenifer Van Deusen. I was the chief horticulturist or head gardener of SEED, which stood for Spreading Educator to Educator Developments.
What are you doing now?
Well, I've taken a fairly significant left turn into medical education. I'm now faculty at Maine's Medical School, working mostly on substance use disorder curriculum and interprofessional education and practice.
If we go back, you mentioned your role as head gardener. When did SEED begin?
Well, SEED began in Maine in 1993.
Okay.
And the roots of SEED were out of the National Diffusion Network, which was an effort on behalf of the Federal Department of Education to identify evidence-based practices in the classroom that would improve teaching and learning.
Okay.
And so SEED was Maine's offshoot of something that originally was called Impact 2, which morphed into what was called later the Teachers Network, which was a national and eventually international network of organizations where teachers were teaching teachers. Mm-hmm. So what SEED did, what the core of it was identifying teachers who were doing amazing things in their classrooms around cutting edge topics that other teachers around the state and really around the country and perhaps around the world needed resources to be able to teach this new content in their classrooms so that students would learn what they needed to be learning. Those, we called them developers. Mm-hmm. The developers were people who would submit a lesson plan or a unit of study to SEED for review, and the ones that were selected were called developers. Mm-hmm. And those were published at the time, as you might remember, in a paper catalog, and then those catalogs went out across the state.
Sure.
And teachers could apply to become an adapter, and those people would take the lesson plan that had been developed and apply that in their classroom.
That model of SEED, which you held true to, that the idea, the kernel, the seed of that idea, which flourished in the developer's classroom, an adapter could harvest a seed from the mature project mm-hmm. and plant it in the soil of their own classroom, which is different. And they weren't expected to march lockstep.
Right.
They could, how might it work in your room?
Yes, exactly. And one of the other really distinguishing factors of SEED were the developers, and to a slightly lesser degree, but also the adapters, were celebrated and rewarded and published. Mm-hmm. It was a way of giving teachers the respect and the honor that they deserved for
Sure.
their hard work and their innovative practices, which was highly unusual. What did happen organically out of that soil grew what we now called learning communities. And we did not formalize that. It didn't become really evident until much later that this is what was happening, such that say you developed something in your classroom in Bowdoin Central,
yep.
and then I'm up in St. Agathe or somewhere, and I want to try your idea. There was an exchange between the developer and the adapter, or adapters, mm-hmm. where people were sharing their own innovations on top of the innovation.
Right.
So the adapter would say, I'm going to, try this and tweak it. such that, I mean, it was very organic, but we didn't have really the wherewithal or the
to capture it
to capture
and follow
it
those threads.
or cultivate it any further.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, you're describing innovation upon innovation, a incremental growth, incremental improvements on top of an idea, which is, I mean, that's what that is an interesting thought. That's worth holding on to.
Yeah.
Jen, we come forward, and Seed took a giant leap in, was it 1998?
It was 1998. Bob Shafto, who was the executive director of the Maine Center for Educational Services, Bob and I and the rest of our team, which included such people as Doris Ray and Elaine Roberts Dow, and Julie St. Hilaire, among many others, decided we would start looking at what grants were available through the Federal Department of Education. And as we were doing that, Bob charged me with Seed with gathering together some of our colleagues from the University of Maine system. And we sat down together one day and I guess for about 4 hours sat there, and the main topic for discussion was, if we had all the money in the world for Seed, what would we do? And we blue skied this thing that envisioned a statewide network of Seed, what we came to be called seedlings, and where there was a centralized hub where things would emanate from, and then a spoke-like model in University of Maine system locations around the state, so that each region of the state would have its own mini garden and be connected to the larger garden.
And ultimately, if we go out to that seed model, that foundational seed model, even beyond that university hub is a teacher who's then a hub to...
Right.
So
there was
the idea
a lot of... Right. So that was the essential idea, and we knew what they also brought up, or we also kind of fixed on that day, that that it was time to start really thinking about how are we going to use these new technologies that were blossoming all around us to support the learning of young people who would be living in a world that was technology driven.
And
right.
driven.
Rich
and by that time, the work in Guilford is beginning. So in Maine,
it was going on, right?
And again, that work in Guilford ahead of the curve. So again, a coming together. I think you used the word as we were talking before. There's a synchronous nature.
Yes, very much so. It was all kind of flow, and part of the signaling for us about that technology was going to be big in schools over time was that the Federal Department of Education had a specific RFP that focused on how are you going to use technology in your classrooms. And in our first submission, we were in the top 20, and they funded, I believe, 14.
Swing and a miss.
So just swing and a miss. But what we did, which I advise anybody listening to this who wants some tips on how to be successful in grant writing, take the advice that your reviewers give you. I took the advice that the comments of the readers, which are accessible to in federal grants. They will send you your readers' comments. So I took those and toiled again for about 6 months, tweaking our original proposal, submitted it, And on a day that my body will never forget, we were alerted that we were that we
funded.
had been selected. We were funded.
A tremendous opportunity for the state of Maine,
Yes.
with the hub located at the center.
Right.
So you go about doing that, and we need to be, of course, completely candid here. I
Right.
had gone back. I had been working for the Community of Learners, another project, an NSF funded grant, part of the Network Infrastructure for Education. And I had worked in that for 3 years and then gone back to teach 6th grade at Bowdoin Central School. You came by and I described what I was about to do, and you said something along the lines of, gee, it's too bad. I have this incredible project. And I said, say what? So seed began. While the technology is important, it's what we do with it that matters. So we come forward. Seed gets underway. The seed, the shirt that you're wearing, and it's rolling. Coincidentally, with this, at the same time, Angus is floating the idea of one-to-one.
Mm-hmm.
Other people are pitching in. So I guess what I would love to, the thread I'd love to follow is that the thread of the human network, of building and bringing into this global project that is some yours, some others, but everybody going in the same direction towards making use of resources to benefit the kids of Maine.
Right, yes. And there are two avenues that come to mind, and I know there's many more, but two pathways into creating this garden early on. And one was after you had joined me at the center to be Seed's, well, a couple of things here, but to be Seed's technology director. Angus was starting his thoughts about this, and I may have my sequencing out, so help me if I'm wrong with this. But somehow, and maybe you remember how, we found out about what was going on in Guilford. Potentially, I think it was actually maybe through Angus that he became aware of what was going on, or maybe you knew. And we offered to assist SAD4 in Guilford with setting up some professional development for the teachers who were about to be the first in the state to receive one-to-one Apple laptops.
Well before the formal launch of the MLTI.
We went up to Guilford with Angus.
Yep.
And I remember clearly walking into the cafeteria and meeting Crystal Priest for the first time.
Yep.
And just being mind-boggled by what they were doing.
Right.
So that was one of the early things. And then as Angus's idea gelled, really stimulated by our friend Seymour Papert, the RFP went out, the bid to bid on this project that became the Maine Learning Technology Initiative.
Right.
And Apple, who I'd been working with at the center for many, many years, came to me knowing that I was building this statewide network and asked if Seed could go into their RFP under the professional development tab. And of course I said, are you kidding? Of course, because it was exactly what we had planned.
It's what we did.
Right. So there was that merging again.
In talking about the work with Seymour, I remember clearly a day sitting in the office, and it was a late fall day. So again, it might have been later, early November maybe, because it was cold and wet. And Seymour was talking over at Bates College.
Oh, yes.
And you said, Jim, come on, we're going to go hear what...
Well, we were in Auburn. It was right around the corner.
It was not far away.
Right.
We had easy access. And I have to be really candid that while I was an advocate for effective and purposeful use of technology, I had some misgivings about the idea of empowering each kid with an individual device, and I just was, because my pedagogical heart and soul is in project-based, real world,
hands-on,
doing things.
Yeah.
So off we go to Bates, and I have to tell you that it was that conversation and listening to Seymour and coming to understand his constructionist foundation. But what a day.
What a day. What a day. Coming out, we had a wonderful time. We stayed after, as I remember, and talked to Seymour.
Yep.
And he was, as we came to learn, as ever brilliant, and having a wonderful chat.
The idea of that human network foundationally made sense to Seymour.
Yes, it fit right in with his worldview.
With his thinking.
Yeah.
But we're sitting there, and it's time. Finally, it's time to. We've got to say goodbye.
We got to say goodbye.
One of the great minds. It needs to.
Right, great minds of our century.
Yep.
Maybe I was going to say decade, but no.
Yep.
Excuse me, century, and there we are. So we're going to hop into. I believe we were in your car.
Nope.
We were in my
your car. Your white
we
Subaru.
Were going to hop into my white Subaru, and Seymour was standing in the parking lot, patting his pockets like this, looking slightly befuddled, and I think he rolled down the window and said, "Can
Are
I
you
help
okay?"
you?" Right, and he said, "Well, I think I locked my keys in my car."
As a result,
absent-minded professor.
I stepped out of the car, opened the door for Seymour. He stepped into your passenger seat.
You hopped in the back.
And had my AAA card.
Right.
And called AAA. And it was the one time, rather than drumming your finger saying, when will they get here? I said, well, take your time.
Yes.
And we spent that time.
Yes, it was probably almost an hour till they arrived.
Yep.
And unlocked him.
The idea, I guess the piece, and you and I have talked about those two networks. The technology has to work, but the human network has to work. There are bumps in both networks. It's the technology director's job to make sure the technology works. How, as it moves forward, when an innovation comes forward, who's in charge?
That's a really good question. For us, or for Seed, it seemed that what happened was we had a really powerful set of interlocking leadership teams. So it was very collaborative. We had 6 regional coordinators, all of whom were brilliant and working very hard to create experiences in their local region that fit the needs of their teachers, and then out in each region there were also each regional coordinator had their own network, and it seemed like a lot of it was crowdsourced. So whatever seemed to come forward with the most energy is kind of what we did. There were things that that I had to make decisions about that were mostly related to funding and then whatever the grant had dictated, that kind of thing. Whatever.
Well, and the evidence. In my conversation with Duke, I mentioned that the MLTI came into being, again, coincidentally with No Child Left Behind. That's not something okay.
Yeah.
So a faith that it can meet standards.
Applicants needed to show how their innovation was going to,
Support
student achievement around these standards.
Right. And again, that there's not a guarantee, do this, I guarantee you'll get this.
Right.
But it is logical that if this unit, if this learning experience is entered into by an educator who likes kids and
Yes,
and
right.
likes to learn
And likes their job.
and likes their job and is joined in that experience by students who know they come to a classroom which is facilitated by a teacher who likes their job, who likes to learn and likes them, then there's a pretty good chance we'll get there.
To your point is our amazing evaluation team led by Doris Ray did produce evidence that students who were in classrooms where teachers had participated in the SEED network in some way did better overall on standards on the standards that we were working with at the time than students whose teachers did not participate in the network. So really the holy grail of we reached the holy grail of educational research, which is, does it change student learning? And we could say yes. The network did. This approach led to better student achievement.
So, as we look forward, other innovations will come along. I guess I'd like to frame this question around your knowledge of the power of the human network, of people talking to each other, of ideas being shared and respected and expected, etc. What advice would you give to the education community the next time an innovation arrives?
Wow, what a great question. Couple of things come to mind. What surfaces for me first is to concentrate on the deliberate building of infrastructure to support the human network. The technology learning leaders were teaching their peers in their region, such that someone in Farmington, let's say, would go to their MLTI initial training and go through that, and they were fun, and we had lunch, and we had, it was a day-long thing. It was really
It's respectful.
Yes, and that was one of our key aspects, was we treated teachers like the royalty they are. And in this case, a teacher from one of the schools in Farmington went to this MLTI introductory training that was pretty well mandated, because they were about to receive this device.
Before you get the device.
Before you get the device, you had to go to their training. And there was their neighbor teaching it. So the beauty of that was we had built this very strong, regionally based, but flexible network whereby someone coming from a school could be taught by their neighbor, and then if they had a question later on, they knew who to call. They knew where to go to get answers. And that person, that technology learning leader, became a resource.
A local resource.
And so that's one thing that I would really recommend, that I think was a part of the reason that we came to develop the tribe that SEED has become. There were some cultural aspects that that I'd also recommend that people who are thinking about large-scale innovation hold on in terms of the human network, hold on to which is a set of values that imbue everything you do, which highlights that respect and expect that you talked about,
Yeah.
and highlights honoring people's expertise and knowing that everybody knows something. That when SEED ended in 2003, I believe it was. Yep, that was 5 years, 2003, 2004. The money went away, but the spirit did not go away. The people who were the technology learning leaders and other seedlings are now the leaders in Maine education, and in some cases national and global.
Yep.
And so there was some kind of synergy that happened due to how people were treated, and that they were tapped for their expertise and honored and respected and rewarded and celebrated for that which they could then extend to others.
It's been a pleasure.
This is so fun.
I
could talk about this with you for days, but you know that.
A trip down memory lane in so many
Right.
ways, but that's what these conversations have been about, Jen. It's okay to go back down memory lane, but thank you for taking those powerful memories and projecting them forward to whatever comes next.
Yes, well, it's just an honor and delight to revisit this amazing experience that we got to have. So,
Thanks very much.
thank you, Jim.